Hello, everyone. Today's episode may be a short one, but this episode may be a short one, but I just want to touch upon the fact that you don't make claims without proof, right? If you believe something is impossible, right, you have to have proof for it. Otherwise, it's an illogical choice, like I said before. Here's the reason why I say that, because many atheists will deny that they lack faith in God. That's why they don't believe God exists. But let me tell you something. Do you know that many of these, mythical creatures can be created in labs? Atheists always talk about, the flying spaghetti monster. Do you know that creature can be created in a lab right now? That very creature that you speak of can be created in a lab. If science can create something, yet atheists keep claiming those things, it is impossible for those things to exist. Don't you think it's atheists that are wrong? If an atheist says it is impossible for Zeus or Hercules to exist, right? These are gods, right? And a scientist goes to a lab, take a human being, and use. Let's just say for Zeus, for example, Zeus is harder to create than Hercules. If that they're electric eels, right? Electric eels, produce lightning from their body. If a scientist can figure out how to splice the genes of a human with that of an eel, and create the genes to produce lightning from the body of a human. Now a human will be able to produce lightning from the body. If they could advance that advance that technology, a human will be able to shoot lightning bolts from their bodies at will. But here, atheists are saying that is impossible. It is impossible for something like Zeus to exist without proof. This is why you need proof for something. Whether you believe something exists or not, or whether you believe something can exist or not, you require proof for both sides. Because if you believe something can't exist without proof, and someone is capable of creating that thing in a lab, aren't you the stupid one? Aren't you the illogical one? Think this through. If something can be created in a lab, yet you're here claiming that it can't exist, aren't you the illogical one? You have no proof of it. You have no proof that this thing can exist. But yet here you are making claims that God can exist, making claims that this thing can exist, making claim that, Zeus, Apollo, and all these other, Greek gods can exist. Yet these Greek gods can be created in labs. You don't know you don't know the technology that we can have in the future. So stop making claims without proof. It shows you're not smart. It shows you're not a logical person. And if you're not this is why I keep saying atheism is not a logical choice. It is illogical by default. And since it's illogical, no matter what you do, nothing can change their mind. It's like someone who if you go to a caveman, right, and tell them we can create planes that fly that can make us fly, they will never be able to some of them the smart ones just say we just accept it, right? Why? Because they can't prove that humans can't create that thing. If they can't prove that humans can't create planes, they shouldn't believe that humans can't create planes. It's illogical to believe that humans can't create planes just because you don't see proof of it. So if someone goes to a caveman and tells them we can create planes, we can cure some diseases, some of these diseases we can cure, you don't have to be sick. We can cure your illness. Follow us, we can cure your illness. And the person immediately denies them. Nope, you have no proof that you can cure us, so leave us alone. Why don't you believe us? Because you have no proof that you can cure us. So we will ignore you and all the even if you have a phone, you show them evidence that we can do this. Even if you heal someone in front of them, someone who's sick in front of them using medicine, they still won't believe you because there's someone who's already has a closed mind that already believes that, it is impossible for something to happen, no matter how logical you are, they will never believe you. No matter how logical you are, they'll never believe you. And that's the problem with atheism. They've already accepted that God doesn't exist. Since they already believe that God doesn't exist, just like a caveman already believed that planes do not exist. It is impossible for planes to exist. Why would a caveman just automatically believe that it is impossible for planes to exist? Why would an atheist automatically believe that it is impossible for God to exist without proof? Don't you think that's illogical? Don't you think it's illogical for someone to just say it is impossible for planes to exist in this world without at least providing evidence or reasons why? Why do you believe it's impossible? Most cavemen will tell you, oh, it's impossible because I've never seen it before. But just because you've never seen it before does not make it impossible. Just because you've never seen a plane fly before does not mean it is impossible for planes to fly. Just because you've never seen an atomic bomb before does not make it impossible for atomic bombs to exist. Just because you've never seen God before does not make it impossible for God to exist. So stop making claims that God do not exist without proof. Claiming that God does not exist, that's the sense of atheism. They believe that God does not exist. Believing that God does not exist without proof, it's illogical by default. This is why I keep saying it's illogical to believe that God doesn't exist. Because what proof do you have to believe that? What proof do you have? You have no proof that God doesn't exist. You have no proof that humans can't fly planes. You have no proof that, the atomic bomb doesn't exist. If you have no proof, stop believing in things you have no proof for. And this is what you need to, deal with as a theist. Since atheists have already decided, they've already made up their mind that God doesn't exist without proof, right? Without proof, that means they're illogical people. They made an illogical choice to believe something without evidence. And since they, decided to believe something without evidence, even if you bring evidence in front of them, they'll try to deny it. Why? One of the reasons is it'll make them look bad. They've been claiming that God doesn't exist for years. And the moment you bring proof in front of them, they'll immediately deny it, out of shame. They don't want to be mocked for being a fool, who just keep claiming things without evidence. So that's one of the reasons you have to be careful of. Their very pride alone will make them ignore you, even if you have evidence in front of them. Their very pride will make them deny your claims, even if it's the truth. And the other reason is they're too illogical. They've already made up their mind that God doesn't exist. That's what belief, a belief is. When you believe that God doesn't exist, that's atheism. When you believe that God doesn't exist, you've already made up your mind. Since you've already made up your mind, even if God shows up in front of you, you will still say that isn't God. Even if God walks right there in front of you, you will still claim that it isn't God. Why? Because you've already made up your mind that God doesn't exist. This is why you shouldn't be making claims. Do not make claims you can't prove. That, and saying that God doesn't exist, it's a claim in and of itself. Saying that planes don't exist is a claim. You have to prove that planes do not exist. You have to prove that the atomic bomb does not exist. If you can't prove it, stop making that claim. If you can't prove that God doesn't exist, stop making that claim. And it is impossible to prove that God doesn't exist. And since it is impossible to prove that God doesn't exist, you cannot be an atheist using logic. You are an illogical person by default if you are an atheist. If you're an atheist. So that's it for today's podcast episode. I'll talk to you guys later.